In 2006, actor Joe Pichler vanished without a trace. His car was found near a bridge with a cryptic note inside, but no sign of Joe. Was it suicide, foul play, or something else? Today, we dive into the mystery of his disappearance and the questions that remain unanswered. If you're into true crime stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an update. Joe Pichler was born and raised in Bremerton, Washington, a small city located just across the water from Seattle. Growing up in a tight-knit family, Joe was one of 4 siblings. From an early age, he showed a passion for acting and entertainment, a passion that would eventually lead him to Hollywood. Joe began his acting career at the young age of 6, quickly gaining attention for his bright personality and natural talent. His early start in the industry set him apart from other aspiring actors, and by the time he was a pre-teen, he had landed his first major role. Joe became known to the public through his appearance in several family-friendly films, most notably in the Beethoven franchise, where he played Brennan Newton in Beethoven's Third and Beethoven's Fourth. His performance in these films cemented him as a recognizable face in Hollywood during the late 1990s and early 2000s. He also appeared in Varsity Blues, a coming-of-age drama that garnered critical and commercial success. Though not the star of the film, his presence in such a high-profile project further bolstered his reputation as a promising young actor. Despite his success in the entertainment industry, Joe remained grounded and close to his family back in Bremerton. He traveled between Washington and Los Angeles for auditions and filming, but maintained a strong connection with his roots in the Pacific Northwest. Joe's family described him as someone who was full of life, kind, and loved by those who knew him. He wasn't someone who let the glamour of Hollywood change him. In fact, after his early success in films, Joe chose to step back from acting to focus on his education and spend more time with friends and family. This decision came as he finished high school and transitioned into adulthood. After graduating from high school, Joe made the decision to put his acting career on hold. His last credited role was in 2003 when he appeared in a TV movie titled Children on Their Birthdays. Following this, he took a break from the industry, signaling a shift in his priorities. While many young actors find it difficult to step away from the spotlight, Joe was looking to lead a more typical life. He returned home to Bremerton, where he began focusing on the things that mattered most to him: his friends, his family, and his local community. Those close to Joe noted that while he still loved acting, he was content with living a more normal life outside of Hollywood. He spent much of his time hanging out with friends, participating in everyday activities, and contemplating what the next chapter of his life might look like. He didn't rule out a return to acting, but seemed more interested in figuring out who he was outside of the industry. Joe had a tight circle of friends, many of whom had been with him long before his acting career took off. His relationships were described as genuine and deeply rooted, and he remained loyal to those who had supported him throughout his journey. Friends recall that he had a good sense of humor and was easy to be around, often making others laugh and feel at ease. His bond with his family was also strong. His younger siblings looked up to him, and he remained a beloved figure within the Pichler household. Joe's parents supported his acting career, but were equally proud of him for his decision to step away and focus on his personal growth. On January 5, 2006, Joe Pichler's life took an unexpected and tragic turn, leaving his family and friends searching for answers that have yet to come. The events leading up to his disappearance were relatively normal by all accounts, but hindsight would show small details that seemed more significant in light of what would follow. In the days before January 5th, Joe appeared to be going through a difficult time emotionally. His friends and family later reported that he had been feeling down, though no one saw it as a major cause for alarm at the time. Joe had expressed some frustrations with his life and was likely grappling with the difficult transition from his past as a successful child actor to his more ordinary day-to-day life in Bremerton. Although he had decided to take a step back from acting, The uncertainty of his future weighed on him. The night before his disappearance, Joe spent time with a small group of friends playing cards, which was a normal activity for him. He enjoyed the company of his friends, and there was nothing unusual or particularly concerning about his behavior that evening. The gathering was a casual, low-key affair, and Joe seemed mostly his usual self. At some point, however, his mood seemed to shift. He became more withdrawn, though he didn't say or do anything that would suggest he was planning to leave or harm himself. In the early hours of January 5th, around 4 a.m., Joe made a phone call to a close friend. During this call, Joe opened up about some of the things that had been bothering him. He mentioned feeling down, expressing a sense of frustration about his current situation. He was known to be introspective at times, and his friend listened as Joe talked about his struggles. However, nothing in the conversation indicated that Joe was in crisis or that he was planning to do anything drastic. His words were concerning, but not alarming enough to raise immediate red flags. Joe's friend later recalled that while Joe was clearly feeling low, he didn't suggest that he was going to disappear or hurt himself. The conversation ended normally, and the friend didn't feel that anything was particularly wrong. This would be the last known contact anyone had with Joe Pichler. Sometime after this phone call, Joe left his apartment. The exact time he left is unknown, as no one witnessed him leave, and there was no activity in the apartment that might have indicated when he exited. The next day, on January 5th, Joe's family became concerned when they couldn't reach him. Calls to his cell phone went unanswered, and when they checked his apartment, there was no sign of him. Joe's car, a silver 2005 Toyota Corolla, was discovered abandoned later that day near the Warren Avenue Bridge in Bremerton. Inside the car, his wallet, keys, and some of his personal belongings were found. Among these items was a note which referenced Joe's younger sibling. In the note, Joe expressed a desire to be a stronger brother and seemed to be passing on some of his belongings. The note was vague and didn't explicitly mention any intention of harming himself, but it hinted at feelings of self-doubt and frustration. It stopped short of being a clear suicide note, leaving its interpretation open. The location of the car was significant. The Warren Avenue Bridge, a large, well-traveled structure, spans the Port Washington Narrows, a stretch of water connecting parts of Bremerton. The bridge itself is about 88 feet above the water, and its proximity to Joe's car sparked immediate speculation that he may have jumped from the bridge, possibly indicating suicide. This theory, though plausible given the location, was complicated by the fact that there was no eyewitness account of Joe at the bridge, and no conclusive evidence directly pointing to him having taken such an action. When authorities arrived at the scene, they found several personal items left behind inside the vehicle. Joe's wallet was discovered, which contained his identification and some personal effects indicating that he hadn't taken it with him. His car keys were also inside, along with other personal belongings, all neatly left behind as though he had no intention of returning. These items alone were puzzling. Typically, in a case of an individual voluntarily disappearing, one might expect them to take essentials like identification and keys. The fact that Joe left these items behind suggested that something was wrong, though it was unclear whether it was a sign of a planned departure or something more sudden and unplanned. One of the most critical items found in the car was a handwritten note. The note was brief but revealing in certain ways. In it, Joe referenced his younger sibling, expressing a desire to be a stronger brother and mentioning that he was passing on some of his belongings. The note was deeply personal, showing that Joe had been feeling some level of emotional strain, possibly guilt or regret regarding his family relationships. However, the note did not explicitly indicate any intent to end his life. There was no direct mention of suicide or a farewell to his family and friends. The tone of the note was ambiguous, leaving its meaning open to interpretation. While some investigators and family members believed the note hinted at the possibility of suicide, the lack of a clear statement left doubt. Joe was a thoughtful and introspective individual, and it wasn't unusual for him to reflect on his relationships and life choices. The note, while somber in parts, did not seem to carry the definitive finality often found in suicide notes. This ambiguity left many wondering if Joe had simply walked away from his life or if something more sinister had happened after he left the car behind. The location of the abandoned car, combined with the note and the items left behind, pointed to the possibility that Joe might have jumped from the bridge into the water below. Authorities quickly launched a search operation, which included divers from the Coast Guard and local law enforcement. The waters beneath the bridge were scoured for days, but no trace of Joe was ever found. The absence of a body further complicated the situation. In many cases of suspected suicide by jumping from a bridge, bodies are eventually recovered, especially with the level of search effort that was conducted in Joe's case. The lack of physical evidence to confirm this theory kept the possibility of foul play or a voluntary disappearance alive. The Warren Avenue Bridge had been the site of other suicides in the past, which added to the theory that Joe may have taken his own life. However, without solid evidence, this remained just one of several possibilities. The note, while emotionally charged, did not conclusively point to suicide, and the absence of Joe's body left a cloud of uncertainty over the investigation. From the outset, the search for Joe Pichler centered around the Warren Avenue Bridge and the waters of the Port Washington Narrows below. Given the proximity of his abandoned car to the bridge and the potential implications of the note he left behind, authorities considered the possibility that Joe had jumped into the water. The Bremerton Police Department, working alongside other local agencies, initiated searches both on land and in the surrounding waters. The Coast Guard was also brought in to assist, given their resources and expertise in conducting water searches. Divers scoured the depths of the Narrows beneath the bridge, hoping to find any trace of Joe. Helicopters and boats patrolled the surface, but despite their efforts, no body or additional evidence was found in the water. The search was extensive. Over the following days and weeks, rescue and recovery teams made repeated attempts to locate Joe. The Coast Guard used specialized equipment to search the water, while local volunteers and police combed the shoreline and areas surrounding the bridge. Despite these efforts, no significant clues emerged. There were no personal belongings found on the bridge itself, and no one had come forward to report seeing Joe in the area that day. Investigators faced the frustrating reality that they had little to go on beyond the location of Joe's car. The lack of substantial evidence created a challenging situation for law enforcement. Without physical evidence, such as a body or a definitive sign of foul play, the case remained open but difficult to progress. The Bremerton Police Department worked closely with Joe's family, trying to piece together the events leading up to his disappearance. They interviewed his friends and family members, gathering as much information as possible about Joe's state of mind in the days before he vanished. The note found in his car was analyzed for clues, but it remained inconclusive. While it hinted at personal struggles, it did not offer a clear explanation for what had happened. With few leads to follow, the investigation broadened beyond the immediate area of the Warren Avenue Bridge. Authorities considered the possibility that Joe may have walked away from his life voluntarily, or that he may have been a victim of foul play. Missing person posters were distributed throughout the community, and the case began to attract local media attention. As days turned into weeks, the case became a topic of discussion not only in Bremerton but also in nearby Seattle and beyond. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting Joe's background as a former child actor who had appeared in popular films like Beethoven's Third and Varsity Blues. This media coverage brought Joe's disappearance into the public eye. But despite the increased visibility, no new information or credible leads surfaced. The public attention brought in numerous tips from concerned citizens, but none led to significant breakthroughs. Investigators pursued each lead diligently, but they repeatedly came up empty-handed. Over time, as fewer new tips came in, the search efforts began to scale back. The Bremerton Police Department continued to monitor the case and follow up on any new information. But with no physical evidence and no clear direction, the investigation slowed. The involvement of the Coast Guard was a key aspect of the search efforts, as their resources allowed for an extensive search of the water. However, after several days of searching, it became clear that if Joe had entered the water, his body was not in the immediate vicinity. The water currents in the Port Washington Narrows were strong, and investigators noted that if Joe had jumped from the bridge, his body could have been carried away from the initial search area. Still, without definitive evidence, this remained speculative. In the aftermath of Joe's disappearance, his family became vocal advocates for continuing the search. They maintained that Joe would not have willingly disappeared without contacting them and that something had gone terribly wrong. As the weeks turned into months, his family held out hope that new information would come to light, but unfortunately no breakthroughs occurred. The case faded from the headlines, and while it remained open, it grew cold as the months passed without new developments. The disappearance of Joe Pichler has led to numerous theories and speculation, none of which have been conclusively proven. Investigators, the public, and Joe's family have wrestled with several possible explanations for his sudden and mysterious vanishing, but each theory has its own set of challenges, leaving the case unsolved to this day. The first and most widely considered theory is that Joe Pichler may have taken his own life. There are several elements that lend credibility to this possibility. Joe's car was found abandoned near the Warren Avenue Bridge, a location that had seen other suicides in the past. The proximity of his vehicle to the bridge, along with the vague, emotionally charged note left in his car, led authorities to consider suicide as a likely explanation. In the note, Joe referenced his younger brother and expressed regret about not being a stronger brother. While this line seemed to reflect personal struggles and guilt, the note did not explicitly mention suicide, which has left its interpretation open. The bridge's height above the water and its reputation as a place where people had previously taken their own lives added to the theory that Joe may have jumped into the waters below. However, despite the compelling circumstantial evidence, this theory has never been confirmed. The most significant challenge to the suicide theory is the lack of a body. Extensive searches of the Port Washington Narrows, the body of water beneath the bridge, yielded no trace of Joe. While the currents in the Narrows can be strong, making it possible for a body to be carried away, the length and thoroughness of the search operation raised doubts. The Coast Guard and local authorities combed the area for days, using specialized equipment and experienced divers, yet no remains or physical evidence were ever recovered. In many cases of suicide by jumping into water, bodies are eventually found either by search teams or later by natural processes. The absence of any physical evidence from the water, combined with the ambiguity of the note, left investigators unable to definitively conclude that Joe had taken his own life. The second theory revolves around the possibility of foul play. While there was no clear evidence at the scene of Joe's car to suggest that he had been the victim of a crime, the lack of solid proof for any other theory has kept this option on the table. Foul play could take many forms. Joe may have encountered someone with harmful intentions after leaving his car, or he could have been lured into a dangerous situation. The fact that Joe's wallet and keys were left behind in the car raises some questions. In cases of abduction or other crimes, it's not uncommon for personal belongings to be left behind, either as part of the perpetrator's attempt to confuse investigators or because the victim was taken without the opportunity to grab their possessions. While the idea of foul play can't be ruled out, it lacks any direct supporting evidence. There were no signs of a struggle at the scene of the car, no witnesses reported seeing anything suspicious near the bridge, and no physical evidence such as blood or other forensic clues was found in the vehicle or surrounding area. Additionally, none of Joe's friends or family members reported that he had been in any conflicts or dangerous situations leading up to his disappearance. This lack of clear motive or direct evidence has made the foul play theory difficult to substantiate, though it remains one of the possibilities given the lack of answers. A third theory that has been floated, particularly by some members of the public, is that Joe Pichler may have staged his own disappearance. According to this line of thinking, Joe may have been struggling with personal issues, such as the pressures of transitioning from a child actor to a more ordinary life, and decided to leave behind his life in Bremerton. The note found in Joe's car could be seen as a farewell, and the abandonment of his wallet and keys might suggest that he wanted to sever ties with his past life. It's possible that Joe could have arranged to disappear, either starting a new life elsewhere or escaping from what he felt was an unbearable situation. However, there are significant challenges to this theory as well. Joe's family and close friends strongly believe that he would not have disappeared without letting someone know. He was deeply connected to his family, and while he may have been going through a tough time, there was no clear indication that he intended to leave them behind without any form of communication. Additionally, disappearing intentionally is a difficult feat to pull off. In the modern age, leaving behind no trace, especially for someone like Joe, who had appeared in films and was recognizable, would be complicated. There have been no reported sightings of Joe, no unusual financial activity, and no clues to suggest he had planned an elaborate disappearance. Moreover, people who stage their own disappearances often eventually resurface, either voluntarily or when discovered, and after nearly 2 decades, there has been no indication that Joe has reappeared anywhere. None of these theories, suicide, foul play, or a staged disappearance, can be definitively proven. Each has its own strengths and weaknesses, but the lack of clear evidence supporting any single theory has left the case unsolved. The ambiguity of the note, the absence of Joe's body, and the clean state of the abandoned car all contribute to the enduring mystery. Investigators have been unable to conclusively rule out any of the possibilities, and the family has been left to wonder what truly happened. Joe's disappearance has remained an open case for nearly 2 decades, with no significant breakthroughs or new evidence. Theories continue to circulate, and his family still holds out hope for answers. Until more information surfaces, Joe Pichler's fate will remain one of the unsolved mysteries that haunt those closest to him. If you found this video informative and want to see more true crime content, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss an update on our latest stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.